Really happy to have everyone here. Thank you all for your time, and thank you to the panelists and BeastTech for organizing. We're going to have a really great discussion today on really how to get into AI and utilizing your organization. One way we thought we'd start off is talking about some of the main categories of AI. There are many ways to slice this up. This is one of many. So just to go through it very quickly, the good news is that from the poll, it sounds like a lot of the folks on the call today are quite familiar with AI. So this won't be anything super new to you. But when you really think about AI, this breaks down into 6 areas. Machine learning and deep learning. The ability for AI systems to leverage data, learn on their own. Find patterns within data and make sense of that data. Natural language processing and speech recognition. So NLP or what a lot of us, kind of got very familiar with ChatGPT in its first incarnation, the ability for an AI system to, make sense of written text, create text, and understand speech. Computer vision and image processing. Again, the ability for an AI system to make sense of either still images or video. Object detection. So if you see that little image there, these little bounding boxes that make sense of the objects on this table. Again, this is technology that's underpinning a ton of things across all sorts of industries. If anyone has a Tesla and you drive around, and you see it popping little people up in cars and things, that's computer vision at work. Robotics and autonomous systems. Of course, a lot of us have been familiar with robotics in science fiction for many years, but now we are on the cusp of the emergence of very interesting commercial and potentially consumer robotics applications beyond just the Roomba cleaning your floor. Knowledge representation and reasoning. This is the technology that really allows AI systems to make sense of the data that it's looking at. So being able to create connections between the data, logical inferences, and actually making conclusions out of analyses. And then, of course, what we do not want to skip over is the importance of ethics, policy, and societal impact. Since the sort of launch of ChatGPT in November 2022, those of us who've been working in AI for many years, these are always, it's been decades and decades. AI has been going since the 50s, but really it seems like there's been this massive explosion. With that, we absolutely have to be aware of and be cognizant of the ethical issues, the policy issues, the impact to society in terms of jobs, privacy. There's in the British Columbia government, there's an AI policy under development. But again, I would encourage everyone on the call to very deeply consider all of these issues here. So again, very fast, quick framework. There's lots of ways to slice it up. Definitely get your questions into the chat as we go here, and we'll kick it off into the panel. So again, team, thanks for joining. Let's kick off. We got a little intro from Erica on your backgrounds and your companies a little bit, but why don't you tell us each a little bit about how your company is using AI, core in your business. And Jesse, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I mean, I gotta say we don't use AI as much as we should be, but we kind of have started using it across the entire organization. Obviously, it's in our product in terms of how it helps our customers, but we also use it. Our sales teams use it. We use it in productivity, so software development, and we've actually started using it in operations in the form of WBR, so weekly business reviews. I'm sure you guys are all used to doing KPI reviews and things like that, and we started to apply AI in terms of trying to see if we can get additional insights from that. So in terms of other areas, I think there's more that we could be doing, but I think it's good to slowly roll it in instead of trying to take on too much at once.
No, that's great. Appreciate it. And George, how about you? And you've also got you touch a lot of different things because your company builds products both internally and for other companies. So tell us a bit about how you guys are using AI with your business.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That's one. So I saw like more than 90% of respondents said they use AI in some form. So the perspective I want to add, Rob, is precisely that. Obviously, we use, as a tech company, we use flat AI like ChatGPT or CoPilot, meeting all kinds of common things that we all use today. So we try to leverage, and to, like Jesse, we also feel like we don't use as much as we could. But the perspective I like to add is we use AI to provide our services and also to integrate that into our own products. As an example, we use so there's a chatbot that we created that we can explain to it what we need, like what web form we need to build, and then the chatbot will create the screen or a web form for an enterprise application that that we can in turn leverage to use a form automation workflow in an enterprise. So so that helps us to offer our services better, cheaper, and faster to our clients, and also helps us to create that products that our clients can leverage to make their services faster. So that's one little perspective I wanted to add.
Excellent. Thanks. Ashish, how about you?
So thanks, Rob, and thanks, Erica and BZ Tech for putting this on and having me back. So I would say we kind of, there are three buckets. One is kind of the standard productivity. I'm sure a lot of people are doing that already. So things like meeting prep, summaries, market research, meeting notes, summarizations, things like that. Another area is in product design and development. So all the way from kind of product requirements, even before that, kind of ideation and brainstorming, and even actually we're getting into like using it for UI. And then the third is definitely as kind of our platform, embedding AI into various aspects, all the way from predictive analytics to kind of personalization and employee support. So yeah, it's falling into multiple categories, and it's just kind of really exciting. There's so many different, I definitely concur with the others. There's so many more opportunities, but yeah, those are the three buckets that our experience falls in.
No, that's great. Thanks very much. It is interesting. It's crazy. I think a lot of us, we've all been in tech our entire careers. I hate to age myself, but I watched the Mosaic browser drop in the computer lab at SFU in 1993. I was I had more hair back then, but it's incredible how quickly things have moved. And even in this last 18, 20 months, we've just seen again this what people are calling the Cambrian explosion of applications. I'm sure all of us, if you're like me, I get a call from my mom very regularly asking me about what all this AI, or she sometimes says IA, means. It's all over the news. How does that impact things? So I think one of the other interesting factors we wanted to ask everyone about is, where do you think this technology has been overhyped or generally, kind of misunderstood in the market? And George, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Rob. That is, it's a good point that you're touching on this AI accessibility paradox, or where on one side people think that, oh, I just can pay $25 and get the SaaS product, and that will make my company AI enable my company. On the other hand, there are the nuances of implementing AI. Is really complex on a large organization from the standpoint of security, data, policy, decision making, from very new security threats or new security landscape that it exposes the company, the ways in which you're handling your customers' data. So all kinds of nuances in implementing AI in a large organization. So the paradox there is that on one side, you think that you can just turnkey enable it, and on the other side, there is so much, it's the complexity is sometimes hidden. And so the misunderstanding, the perspective would like to bring is the misunderstanding of the real complexity in implementing and aligning various AI initiatives with the strategic alignment or where the organization wants to go. It sometimes can look very easy as buying ChatGPT for all your team members. At the same time, I would love to encourage all of audience to really try to understand the nuances of aligning these initiatives, just like any other organization change management that you'll do, and understanding the complexity of the technology. So sometimes it looks easy, but there's a lot. Especially think of security as well as data handling.
No, that's great. And we see this in industry. We see a lot of organizations start to apply and realize they run into a roadblock, whether it's data or how the data is structured, things like that. It's very, it can be a big challenge. Ashish, what have you seen that's been sort of overhyped or again, misunderstood?
Yeah, we're seeing kind of a spectrum, like hype on one end, fear on the other, and I think people are trying to calibrate. So I'll definitely build on what George said. So I think I would sort of think of it as there's kind of the low hanging fruit, which is there's opportunities around productivity, some of the examples that I gave earlier. But I think there's a really big difference between doing that versus using it for things that are more mission critical, like decision support, where you're actually going to make a big bet, make an investment based on something that AI is going to output. And that requires, like if you're really tackling a hard problem, it's going to require a lot of planning, a lot of data prep, a lot of training, a lot of fine tuning, a lot of testing, assurance, explainability, some of the other things that George mentioned on security and privacy regulation. So, you really have to kind of think about how you want to apply it. But if you're really going to get behind it and use it as a strategic asset, you're going to need that kind of explainability and transparency in addition to what I mentioned. And I think the last thing I would say is that kind of what I would call the last mile of human judgment and specialized skills. It's very easy to look at something ChatGPT outputs and it's so confident and it's nicely organized and so on. But if you really are an expert, you can actually start, and what you're asking it, you can actually start to see where it's a bit of a lightweight in terms of how it's answering. It's capable of a lot more, but for the most part, it'll answer quite confidently, even when it's totally wrong. So it's having that ability to kind of discern between the two. So I think the hype is that it's really good at everything when it's actually good in lightweight things, but it can be used properly to do much more complex things, but requires much bigger investment.
No, that's a really good point. And I think that confidence is a great way to describe it, because certainly, we all have that author versus editor, kind of switch that flips. And certainly when you're authoring and you spend a lot of time looking at something and researching, it engages parts of your brain. When you're editing, you kind of look at it very differently. And when it does come out beautiful and formatted, you have this kind of, it goes to the reptile part of your brain that thinks, oh, that must be right, because it looks well done. So I think your point's a really good one. We've got to check the sources and check it, make sure that the data is accurate. There's no hallucinations. Jesse, how about you? Any area that you've kind of come across that you think has been a bit overhyped or kind of not well understood by the market?
Yeah, I want to echo what Ashish said about the fear. I remember initially when GPT came out, within a few months, it started to become the hottest thing on the kind of news cycle. And I would go to these conferences and there would be these kind of these meetings set up, and these are like, founders, these are tech, or maybe not even tech, like CFOs, CMOs, etc. And generally the topics were all on like, oh no, what are we going to do? AI is going to replace. There's definitely a lot of fear there. It's almost like, you have these companies that they do content, or they might do translations, for example, and they feel like all of a sudden, you have ChatGPT that could do all of that. What do we do now? And it was definitely more of a focus on, we're going to get replaced, rather than how does this enable us? So I think that initial sort of fear was a bit misguided, I think, and it was also very pessimistic. It was looking at it from a perspective of, not from a positive productivity perspective, but from a negative perspective. And so I do think that there is generally this, on the other spectrum, a hype of just, yeah, like it's going to be able to replace, like it's going to take time. And as Ashish said, there's definitely a lot of hallucinations going. That's just ChatGPT. And you've mentioned this earlier. AI has been around for decades now. It isn't just all of a sudden now starting to show up. It's more like now it's in a way that people are digesting, and they can actually almost tangibly feel it in a way that they're actively thinking AI. But in reality, the ads that you see when you're doing searches, those algorithms, that can be loosely called AI already, right? And amongst you mentioned computer vision, Tesla's got that. When you're driving it, those are they already exist, so they're already making an impact. I think people just overestimate, I think, how quickly it's just going to start taking over our lives, when in reality, it's slowly been taking over our lives already, right? But maybe not at the rate that people think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse, we'll keep going with you on the next one. Then I'm going to make you change your brain now and say, well, where do you actually think are the most opportunity and upside potential, in the technology? And really, if you think about it, I think in the context of making a positive impact on the world, where's the good?
I think that this is definitely a revolutionary technology. I think that if we look back at the kind of major pivotal moments that we have, Internet was one. It's changed how we do things, how life is. Even Google, when Google was introduced, it changed how we did search. Like before that was Yahoo and all that, but I don't think it quite had the same impact that Google did. And then after that, the phone. Now mobile phones are basically a necessity now. You can't really go around without it. And I do think having these very powerful LLMs is a similar case. But just like with the phone and with Google and with the internet, everybody has to kind of learn how to use it. You don't just type in something in Google. Back then there was a skill. You have to learn how to Google effectively, right? And then same thing with phones. It takes time to build all those productivity apps and until the phone actually became the smartphone became so integral in our lives. So I do think there is a ton of room for AI, especially large language models, to be more accessible for everyone to actually actively be doing things and thinking about how they want to use this sort of large language model and AI, so to speak, to be more productive. But it is also going to be a skill. And, as she said, lots of hallucinations. And so you have to really know how to use it in a way that will actually help you instead of you becoming reliant on it, so to speak. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thanks. George, what do you think? Where are the biggest opportunities for AI to have, a really positive impact?
Yeah, I think of my perspective from the work that we do and what I see is that AI, the biggest impact or the biggest impact that AI can bring is to help the society at large when government adopts AI. What we are excited to see is a lot of times governments as stewards of citizens' data has this responsibility to balance people's information with their long-term well-being. But the biggest opportunity, I think, is when government uses this data to provide digital government services to give that service to that to that old person who need more accessibility, or to that young person who need to access it in a different way, or in planning our environment. So in environment, in resource planning, in better delivery of infrastructure, in healthcare. So when government is ready to use it and use it for the betterment of society at large, I think that's one thing that's very close at hand, and I think that's one big change that's waiting to happen, and that's exciting to see that's already happening.
Great, George. And Ashish, obviously your mission with workforce wellness is to really do a lot of good in a lot of very interesting areas. Where do you think the biggest opportunities are for AI?
Sure. Yeah, I'd echo what the other speakers just said. I think there's three areas that we're looking at. I mean, we're involved in healthcare quite a bit. So we're already seeing like so much waste and administrative workload and overhead that can be reduced through AI, and we're working on like practical applications. But just in healthcare, the ability to give personalized care, predictive modeling, disease diagnosis, drug discovery, there's just tons of opportunity. I think that's probably where we're going to feel it the most in terms of the impact of AI on all of us on a personal level, even if we're not using it ourselves. I think education is another one. Lots of personalized learning opportunities, especially for kids that are like neurodivergent and don't fit into the kind of the standard models of education today. Having persistent tutors, the ability of AI to adapt to learning styles. And the last one I think is just what I'm personally most excited about are like scientific breakthroughs. So it's not something we hear about a lot, but in the areas of specialized research where there's new materials, new processes, climate innovation, and one that I'm really excited about and tracking is cross-species communication. I know that sounds like an obscure, weird thing, but I think that's going to be absolutely transformative in our ability to understand, our world. And then just broadly, I would just say there's a lot of industries that there's a lot of administrative, bureaucratic, very kind of slow moving processes that will all get improved and become more efficient. So I think it'll be across the board, but those three, healthcare, education, and kind of the scientific areas, I think are the ones that'll have the biggest positive effect.
No, I appreciate that. I think I keep telling I've got sort of young adult children, and keep telling them that they are going to see an absolute explosion of innovation across a number of areas. On the healthcare side, in Vancouver, we've got variational AI working on oncology solutions. We've got Diagen working on small, large molecule, protein design. Just that area alone is going to be huge. I think the other area, just to chime in, I've seen just huge, benefit is, you've got small businesses being able to use this technology in ways that open them up. English as a second language, being able to translate things, being able to have email and chat communication, that's much, much more effective. Being able to do all sorts of things, even from a marketing standpoint, that you couldn't do even 6 months ago. That's enabling folks on tight budgets, coming out of COVID and being in sort of a recessionary period, be able to do more with less. I think that's been a big, very positive impact I've seen on a lot of small business owners, which has been great. So moving kind of along, I think, again, taking another quadrant here, let's talk about risks. There's lots of great, but there are, of course, risks with using AI in the workplace. What are some of the things that you folks think are the questions that companies should be asking themselves, in particular about risk, when they are looking at adopting and becoming customers of new AI technologies? And Jesse, maybe we'll start back with you again.
Sure. I'm probably going to go somewhere maybe a little bit adjacent to AI, and it's actually the spend versus adoption. AI isn't cheap. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Slack, and that's what we use at CoPilot. And then they have this AI feature that you can enable, and then you can kind of use it to search and use the things that are within, like, from the conversations, because Slack is great for conversations, but not great for trying to find the data, right? And so you can enable this feature, but it's $10 per user. So when your organization gets large per month, the cost goes up, especially if you're still kind of like medium size and you're trying to manage costs. But then how many of your users are actually going to use it? I've found that there's a lot of this tech stack creep that we have right now, where there's a lot of tech, and you're paying for the licenses for all the users, but actually not everyone's using it. And so it does drive up costs, and you think that AI is going to suddenly transform your business, but you also have to be careful that it's not as simple as just turning it on. A lot of it is educating your team, building the right behaviors, the right sort of habits, so that they're actually using it as part of their process or part of their day-to-day, rather than just, oh, here's a tool, and it's going to make everything better for you.
No, it's very, very true. George, what are some of your perspectives on that?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse, for saying that. I want to touch on a very related concept of the dependence. Once let's say you are able to overcome that cost, and then now you have deployed AI into the fabric of your operations business, and then the dependence on these technologies and think of it as a very rapidly changing technology, very rapidly changing landscape, and then your small business or your large enterprise being overly dependent on things, and the investment and the strategic direction, as well as strategic investment that is built around these technologies, and these things change on you very quickly. So that's another big risk, in addition to the commonly understood risks like this is another dependent wanted to point out, and a very related thing is also the intellectual property, like the dependence as well as dependence on other people's IP to build your organization, could create unexpected risks for your company.
No, that's a really good point, right? And I think that, and we can talk a bit more about that hopefully in the Q&A around ethics and data and privacy and things. Again, this is an area I know, Ashish, as well, in your line, risks is something you guys have to think about quite a bit, dealing with the healthcare industry. What have you seen? What are some of the things that you think folks should be very aware of from a risk standpoint?
So I think there's one, which is just not having the right policies, not communicating those policies. So, there's a good chance, I think, just based on the polling done at the start of this, webinar, lots of people are using it, but there's a chance that the use is actually higher than even what people realize in their organizations. If you don't have a proper policy, people are uploading whatever could be confidential information. So that's just kind of one generic one. I think some of the ones that are harder to solve and they're much more real and much more impactful are things like verifiability. So, if you get a response, how do you actually verify the response is accurate? We ran some experiments where we, gave it a complex problem. It did an output and we were trying to verify it, and we got stuck at 3-4% through the problem because it was so complex that it was just so hard to figure out if it was right. The validity of the answers, the kind of transparency and explainability. And so I think as these models get more complex and the kinds of problems we use them to solve for us, there's going to be this kind of the student becomes a teacher problem, if you will, where we can't grade our teachers' work because it's smarter than us in some ways, or it's doing things that are way more complicated. So I think those are kind of the types of kind of blind spots organizations can have that they really have to kind of think through. It's like, how do you really have trust in what the output is of what it's doing? And I don't think there's an easy answer to that. There may be AI to validate other AI or something like that down the road, but certainly it doesn't exist yet.
No, it's a great point. And again, there is a branch of AI, sort of this explainable AI concept, where whether it's either going to be policy or guardrails or in the models, where a lot of folks are asking for the ability to say, explain to me how you did come, the AI, how did you come to that conclusion? What were the inputs? What were the outputs? What were the calculations that were done? Because you're absolutely right. We're hearing a lot of examples of output that are really hard to trace back. And while that sort of super intelligent feel of it is, can be great and can advance us, it is something we have to be very, very well aware of. And again, I think, we talked about this as well, but the ethical side, and understanding, I think what we've probably seen lots of examples of, when we're trying to engineer the solution to a problem, it's very straightforward, or it feels like if you're an engineer, you got to work through the problem. And we've seen lots of examples of making sure that the data you've acquired and how you've looked at the PII elements of that data are all very ethical. So there are, I think we've all touched on, there are lots of risks in that area.
I would just add just one quick thing, Rob, which is when you actually listen to a lot of interviews with people that have actually designed some of these systems, and even they're at a loss. So if the creators and the architects and the designers of the technology are themselves unsure of how it's working, anyway, we just have to take a kind of a skeptical, slow approach to make sure that we do have confidence in how we're using it.
Yeah, again, it's great. Like the procedural computing of our lifetime, where it's if this then that, and sort of procedural comes up to conclusions. Now we've got neural networks, we've got reinforcement learning, we've got all these technologies in AI that act like a human brain in many ways and find patterns in data at a very high speed and high scale that that it would be impossible for an individual human to figure out. I think there's risk and opportunity in that for sure. So turning back a little bit to each of your business operations, it'd be very, I think, good for everyone on the call to understand. Again, we've touched on it a couple of times, but where have each of you seen AI adoption be really, really impactful? And again, I'd say either in your business operations or with your clients or in adjacent spaces. I think really this is the key to a lot of this is what's working. Like there've been a few stories lately of people saying we've adopted AI, it's just not worked or not had the productivity benefit. Lots of data coming out saying we are seeing huge productivity gains. Where have you each seen really impactful, adoptions of AI? And Ashish, we'll start with you again.
Sure. So I think if you start with a bit of a quadrant, let's say you have ROI and risk, let's say, and I think there's a bunch of kind of high ROI, low risk opportunities. That's where we're seeing a lot of organizations. I think we've already talked about productivity. I think that I'll go kind of beyond our organization just so there's kind of a broader pool of information that I can share from. There are specific roles where they're much more likely to be augmented with AI, where there's kind of low hanging fruit. I think in the case of George's company or Jesse's company, the ability to kind of augment your teams with AI. I think McKinsey did a really, really interesting bit of research a couple of years ago, and they found that 75% of the gains from AI are going to come from 5 areas: customer operations, marketing, sales, software engineering, and R&D. And that's based on like a lot of function mapping and sort of looking at what generative AI and other kind of tools that companies are adopting, where the biggest benefit's going to be. And my personal feeling is that kind of process automation, which has been around, but kind of smart process automation, finding those kind of repeatable processes in your organization that can be automated. And they don't have to be automated completely. It's either reducing steps or can be accelerated. I think those are kind of the areas to look at, and otherwise, just it's just organizations really starting pilots. I think figuring out where you are on the maturity curve, and if you can get your employees kind of skilled up, get buy-in, make sure you're getting kind of your data ready, and starting to do some pilots. I think that's kind of a great place for organizations to start. Those are the organizations we're seeing have more success.
Right. Yeah, that organizational readiness, kind of a step zero is very important. So, Jesse, how about you? Where have you sort of seen AI adoption be the most impactful?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to quantify, because when you're talking about productivity and things like that, it's like, how would you really measure it? We've definitely seen, we definitely use it in a lot of different areas, and we ourselves, we're kind of, we offer AI as part of our product. We use it to drive better engaging conversations it's like a sales enablement tool almost. You can use it to improve the engagement you have with your prospects. But internally, we've definitely, going back to the automating of processes that Ashish mentioned, we actually have a lot of like employee-driven initiatives. When we go, for example, to customer support, we actually have our own CS team member building their own chatbot to then handle, for example, tier 1 call, like low level requests, and then after, if it needs to be elevated or escalated, sorry, then it would go to an actual person. And so I think the most effective part is really trying to educate your team and having them be more AI literate, knowing the capabilities of AI, and then having your team go and figure out what's the best way to implement it into their process. We're still kind of figuring things out when we're talking about operational stuff. I mentioned WBRs. That's another area where I think sometimes I almost take it for granted in terms of having a good understanding of data, like data analytics, being able to look at data and derive insights. And that's not something that everyone will take naturally, but AI is great at that, right? AI is great at looking at patterns, looking at data and identifying patterns or identifying insights that then can be translated. And with LLMs right now, I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity there. So we've been kind of testing out whether or not this is something that we can almost use on a weekly basis as part of our weekly business review.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. I think there's so much kind of going on. I'm going to surprise you guys with a question after this while we have a few more minutes before we kind of get into questions. But Ashish, we'll go back to you. Oh, sorry, George. Sorry.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's really building on Ashish's and Jesse's thoughts here. The biggest impact that we see is also in empowering the democratization of AI, in empowering the groups that you previously couldn't develop applications or previously couldn't code or previously couldn't do process automation. Like Jesse's example here, right, is the biggest opportunity or the biggest opportunity that we see. Like employees themselves, like business analysts or business people, or even leaders and managers are able to create tools like agent building tools or, RAG tools or low-code application development environments. Once company implements such a platform or like an agent building tool, then everyone in the org is able to, or not maybe everyone, but like previously impossible or people who couldn't have done it before are able to use these tools and automate their own processes and build their own little apps. So that's the biggest and the most powerful thing that I see. Just along, I mean, that's exactly what Ashish was talking about, process automation. And I'm just thinking that more and more people in the org, citizens, citizen-driven development, you can think about that, or the democratization of AI, where everyone in the org is now able to leverage these tools and deploy AI solutions to the business problems that they're seeing or to enhance lives of people.
That's great. Thanks very much. So here's my surprise question, sort of surprise question. You know, 'cause we've got just a couple minutes here, and then we'll want to jump into some questions. It looks like there's some good questions in the chat. For each of you, you know, do you feel that, you know, utilizing AI both as part of your product and within your business in a variety of ways has had an overall net positive improvement in both the quality and capability of your product, but also the quality and capabilities of your team and your output? So Ashish, I'll start with you.
Sure. So in short, a resounding yes. I think what we realized through some of the more kind of newer things that we're working on is that we actually underestimated, like we weren't thinking big enough. I think we were kind of through the process of designing and actually almost partway through development and realized how much more capable some of these models were, and that we had actually underestimated and hadn't, you know, we weren't ambitious enough. So we kind of like stopped and, you know, rethought our product roadmap. So yes, in short, it's had a huge impact for us, especially on our product. I think again, the internal use is kind of a very different case because it's, you know, limited. I'm sure it'll get better and you know, more impactful as we get bigger as an organization. But in terms of the capabilities of you know, generative AI tools that we're using and models that we're using, you know, just one simple example that I'll give to kind of just ground what I'm saying, so it's not so esoteric, is that, you know, in healthcare there are these complex, you know, policy documents and, you know, SOPs and union agreements that can be hundreds of pages, and some of them can be contradictory, you know, or compete with each other. But the ability of some of these LLMs that we're using to, you know, parse through them and answer really complex queries for, you know, and make the job of kind of making all that explainable and accessible and streamlining processes in healthcare. It's really you know, it's really transformative. This stuff has been, you know, it's required like high priests who really have the ability and patience to kind of understand this stuff. So anyway, it's been really transformative. And my only advice would be rethink your expectations, think bigger, and, you know, basically look at this through the lens of like proper AI transformation. So more time thinking about, you know, how you'd like to use it versus, you know, either being afraid of it or jumping in and then just kind of haphazardly using whatever comes along. Just have a proper process for evaluating and implementing the right technologies.
Awesome. Thanks. George, how about you? What have you seen? You've seen a positive or a negative impact in terms of both your own products and your team's use of AI?
I'll also affirm, like, it's an absolute yes, it's a positive impact. At the same time, what I would like to shed light into is the effort that goes onto it. Like, you know, it doesn't just happen naturally. For example, internally, we have to have significant changes or readjustments in training plans, including the founders are doing master's degrees in a, you know, including everyone is, we are creating budget for everyone to do their advanced degrees or education in AI. Because if it's really tricky, if you think about it, this is self-transformative. Like, for example, a citizen developer means we are selling development services, and then, we are also empowering people to replace us. So it's a self-transformative journey. And, you know, when I say it's a big yes, it's also because of a concerted effort to change and adjust and adapt and to invest in defining the future.
Excellent, thanks. And Jesse, of course, you guys have AI in your name, and you were one of the early companies to have that. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's definitely helped us. It's helped us differentiate ourselves from our competitors. And I think, you know, maybe going on a different route here, I would say that it helps kind of frame, like, it helps frame kind of the mission statement more for us, because we're in sales enablement, we're in the sales space, and something that typically people think when they think sales or you know, sales enablement or sales, like sales funnels in general, is it's a numbers game. You know, you just drive as many leads as you can, and then that's how you're going to grow your business. But we're treating it as more, you know, where we want quality over quantity, right? Why does it always have to be quantity? And, you know, generally it's really hard to scale up that problem, but that's where AI comes in. We're seeing success being able to do that. So I definitely think AI is playing a very important part in kind of in one area of improving this kind of entire sales funnel, so that maybe you don't have to spam people to do prospecting, right? Because that's kind of, we almost accept it as fact. You're going to get spam calls, you're going to get a ton of spam emails, but that doesn't have to be the case, right? So that's an area that we're seeing lots of progress in. I've also, similar to what Ashish and Jordan has mentioned, I've kind of been using it in ways where it's like when we're talking about, for example, legal documents, like it's so hard to understand what the heck the legalese is meaning, but you can kind of pass that through and really ask it, not to just replace your lawyers, because that's not my advice to people. Don't fire your lawyers yet. You still need them on retainer, but you can use it to kind of get yourself ready to ask the right questions that you want with your lawyers when you're talking about these large agreements or large sort of contracts that you might be looking at, right? So I think from a more practical perspective, that's actually saved a lot of time and money.
Yeah. We started using GPT-2, in September 2019 when it first came out. We look at huge data, we look at dark web and other data to make sense of things. The summarization capabilities are phenomenal. So just even the ability, I've found even as the models in the last 2 months have progressed, the research capability, I think, Ashish may have mentioned earlier, product design, be able to, ask it what features to develop, and then to summarize huge amounts of data and competitive research really quickly. You definitely get that superpower, kind of feeling. And so I think that's great. So we'll turn to questions. Again, there's lots of long ones. I'll try and scan through really quick. So we'll start with Saurabh's question. Today, data touches everything, but every company dealing with data may not be considered an AI company. So from finding perspective from various Canadian agencies, how a company qualifies to be called an AI company, is it only using the data and learning from it that qualifies you as an AI company, or is it developing technology or a product in order to be called a true AI company? Anyone want to jump in on that one? So the question I think distilled down is, what is an AI company? And I'll maybe add a little bit of flavor to it. AI is everywhere, right? Everyone's bolting, AI onto their startup names for right or for wrong. There's a kind of a dividing line. You're probably either a true AI company, developing models and algorithms, or AI is an input or an ingredient to your product. And then outside of that, if you're using AI in your operations, that's great. But I think that would, in my opinion, would disqualify a company from being an AI company. But what do you folks think?
I'll maybe just jump in. I would say a very simple test, although that's actually a hard question to answer, is if your product wouldn't work without AI, you're probably an AI company, is one way to look at it. Second is how you're applying it. So are you applying, some of the core aspects of, let's say, generative AI or some kind of specialized model? I think there's kind of, obviously, just to Rob's point, it's, if you're trying to raise funding, you're not even going to get a call back from an investor if you're not doing AI, broad generalization here. But so I think there's kind of a temptation to just let's sprinkle a little bit of, AI, put a ChatGPT wrapper around some feature. But I think it's, if you really are embedding it at the core of what your product does, and you can defend that, like in an IRAP context or whatever, in a shred context, and your product wouldn't work without AI, you're probably an AI company. Also recognize this whole honeymoon period will only last so long before everything will have AI, and you'll have the bar will be higher in terms of sort of providing differentiation or definition.
So given the rapid advancement in AI, particularly in lead generation and customer engagement, how do you see AI evolving in terms of balancing automation with maintaining the human touch? Great question. Specifically, what strategies would you recommend for businesses that want to leverage AI for scaling while ensuring personalization and relationship building aspects aren't lost?
That sounds like a plant that Jesse.
Yes, Jesse, that sounds like a Jesse question.
Is that an AI asking that question that Jesse?
Yeah. I mean, this is your world, right? And I think you guys have done a great job of making it a lot better for organizations, automating their outreach, not in a wide and spammy way, but in a finding, the right people that want to hear that right message at the right time. How do you guys approach keeping the human touch and the relationship in the whole thing?
So funny, in our mission statement, you know, we used to put humanizing the digital interactions, but it, you know, we kind of stopped mentioning that because it's very hard to quantify what that even means. But definitely, we believe in human-to-human interaction. One of our North Star, actually, our North Star metric is to measure how many interactions it takes to get to a human-to-human interaction, to meetings booked, and to actually have that meeting, right? So that's something you want to reduce. The number of you want to reduce the number of touch points, like the number of people you touch, just to be able to get a meeting, right? And so nowadays, in general, you look at a lot of businesses, and if I was to just look at sales, you know, every company has some sales development function. Whether you have people in the role or not is besides the point. But you have business development or sales development, and that is a very tedious and repetitious process that does not really involve human interaction, right? So generally speaking, that's an area where we want to apply sort of AI to just remove it from having someone needing to deal with that, and as well as finding a way to be able to optimize it. So if I was to kind of extrapolate that and look at other processes, you want to focus on where the value actually is, where the human-to-human value is, and you want to maximize that, and you figure out how do you apply AI in order to maximize that. And so, you know, for us, actually, that's where our name came from. Before we were even doing sales enablement, when we were a fintech company, we were about maximizing financial advisors with their investors, right? And so that's where the name CoPilot came from. We're not here to replace, we're actually here to help you get a better result to get further. And nowadays, everybody's calling their AI CoPilot. So I think we generally, the consensus is the same, I would say.
No, that's great. And Jesse, so there are a number of messages there from Darren. So Darren, I'd encourage you to reach out to Jesse directly. Like we definitely, we'll have a couple minutes left. We don't want to have him do a full product demo, but lots of good stuff there. I do want to get to Tom's got a good question really quick. Do we think our employees are making fully informed decisions, or are they making convenient decisions? You know, AI co-intelligence should be used. Yes, they are making full intelligence. You know, what do we think? And George, I'll maybe ask you. And again, we've only got a minute or so. So quick answer on that. Do we think our employees are making informed decisions, or are they now getting, and I'll interject a word, like you're getting lazier, you know, perhaps with some of these tools?
I think the normal human aspects of the business, you shouldn't take that away, right? All these are like, just to Jesse's point, these are co-pilots. These are, you know, when let's say there's a sales strategy meeting or a marketing strategy meeting, when those the employees come to it, these tools help them to consider more perspectives, more angles. At the same time, that collective intelligence, human intelligence is necessary. That's the way, at least within our org, that we are able to make sure that the decisions are optimized. By encouraging everyone, we get, for example, ChatGPT licenses for everyone. At the same time, you are expecting the tools that are out there, like all the co-piloting tools that are out there, but at the same time, that human reasoning, just like you see in traditional orgs, like, you know, all that shouldn't go away. And that's how we kind of try to optimize the decision making.
I appreciate it. So maybe just, there are a couple more questions I would encourage. We won't be able to get to them, but I encourage folks, reach out to any of us, find us on LinkedIn, reach out to any of us directly. Happy to help you out. There's some good ones in there, but I do want to just quickly ask the panelists sort of the last rapid fire question. This is always the good final crystal ball. You know, what advice do you have for businesses to get started or to scale up their use of AI that really want to have an impact with it?
I'm thinking of something deep, but at the same time, something quick is don't, you know, so the possibilities of AI, like don't underestimate. A lot of times we see people like really narrowing down to just ChatGPT and we are already AI, or, you know, so alignment of, like I was mentioning earlier, alignment of your strategic goals to first goal and then the tool, then, oh, I have a tool and I'm all AI now, call myself an AI company.
No, great. Thanks. Ashish, how about you?
I would just double up on what I said earlier. So think of it as a transformation. It's a wave. It's coming. Think of it as a proper transformation. You know, have like an evaluation framework, have a team dedicated to it. Like think through how you're going to roll it out. Develop policies. Communicate those policies. Like really, don't be at the kind of receiving end of, you know, just get kind of drowned in it, but really be very intentional, purposeful, understand what's possible, and try and kind of stay away from the hype and the fear. which obviously are both kind of irrational.
Yeah, thanks. All right, Jesse.
I would say focus on what you're trying to accomplish, not what you're using to. So whether it's AI or not is not important from my perspective. You still need to accomplish what you set out to accomplish. So don't just implement AI and go, okay, I'm done, and then not actually end up accomplishing what you set out to do. So going back to what Ashish said, if you have a plan, start with what it is you want to accomplish and then build a plan around that. And if AI fits in, which it likely will, then I think you're going to get much better results that way.
That's great. And a tactical piece of advice I've given to a few organizations that are really at the early stage of it is look to your best customers and how you can serve them better, and look to your most challenging or expensive customers and how can you utilize AI to improve your operational efficiencies there.